happened quite often lately with the US politics going on, etc. But returning to focus on the actual games now, we see Winchester in the purple as the Goths and Chris in the green as the Mongols, as we were saying, because the players do have to pick the same civilizations after a restart. This time we see a more green style Arabia, so Chris has a chance of having a much better map here compared to the desert style Arabia that the map can throw up. Let's start off by looking at that first and foremost, since we're on the subject. You see he's got a decent wood line over here and another one here and a third one towards the back, so really great wood lines for Chris that he'll be able to retreat to one if he loses another, and with two in the back they're going to be quite defensible. Really nice back golden stone, and back stone is particularly important for the Mongols, who will be wanting to have lots of castles later on to produce the Mangudai from. Second gold, pretty easy to actually get hold of here, and TC, this is a great TC location to try and protect a wood line, because the villagers can work behind the TC and also protect the gold. So this is looking like a pretty decent map for Chris, especially as he can do some walling off in various different places, potentially along here as well if he wants to secure lots of map. Third gold kind of far away, but potentially TCable location on top of the hill. Won't be perfect gathering, like a perfect TC to gather the resources from, but he can at least build one there for safety's sake. The second stone as well is not in a terrible location, so I think Chris is actually looking at a pretty good map here. These deer as well, considering that he's Mongols, are you going to be able to push those towards the TC? So, oh my god, I'm so sorry guys. I don't mean to make this mistake twice. I need to get automatic scene switcher, I know. I don't normally make it, but here we go. Let's just take a quick look at the maps then. Again, as I've been describing, let's start from the beginning. We can see that he has great wood lines left to the right of the TC and all the way to the back. Also great back golden main stone. Second gold out here, which he's going to be able to TC, and third one over to the north of the map. That one is a bit far away and exposed, but he can at least build a TC on the flat area to defend it. Here are his deer that he's going to be able to push in as Mongols. And if you look, his map is pretty wallable in some places to try and restrict Winchester from roaming around. Is for now missing 2 sheep at least. But that won't necessarily be too much of a problem if he does take these deer, especially as Mongols. More walling that he can do further off from his base in the late game as well, using the natural terrain to his advantage. Checking out Winchester's map then, I wouldn't say it looks as great as Chris's does, especially given that his wood lines are all forward. He doesn't have one towards the rear of his TC, towards the rear of his base. Does actually have a gold kind of backwards, but his main gold and his second gold are both up here. He might consider TCing this location either here or here to try and defend some of his gold later on, but otherwise I think his map is much more harassable than Chris's, but nevertheless it's not a terrible map by any means. I think he'll be able to do okay with it. It's just that Chris is looking a lot more favourable at this point. Haven't seen any boar steals going on up to this point. Winchester actually choosing to push in a couple of deer, and at the moment he may be thinking about producing. Actually, Chris's scout just getting a decent number of hits on this unloomed villager of Winchester. I think even 1 or 2 downhill hits came in then, and the villager will almost certainly go down. And Chris actually manages to get away with his scout. That's pretty huge. 1 villager down for Winchester already. He tried to quick wall out the scout, but did that just a tiny bit late, and that's also delayed Winchester's barracks, which means any drush that he does will be coming in a little bit later. So great start for Chris now. Not only is he sitting on a better map, but he's also inflicted a 1 villager disadvantage upon his opponent at this early stage. So Chris choosing not to actually push in deer with his scout, but instead gaining the prize of a villager kill in his opponent's base. I'm surprised Winchester wasn't a tiny little bit more proactive with just walling in that villager ahead of time, and maybe even bringing his scout back to try and just stand guard over that villager whilst it just quickly erected that triangle of palisades to keep it safe. So Chris did actually kind of sort of intercept those sheep that Winchester was taking from him, but Winchester picks them up again, going to give chase to Chris's scout, and Chris's scout will not be able to participate in this drush that is moving across the map because the HP is so low. But Chris is being very clever now. He's luring that scout of Winchester's a long away from his base, which means that Winchester will not be able to use that scout to help defend against Chris's drush. Mongol drush, not the most common thing you see, but certainly very viable with the hunting bonus, enabling them to kind of spend the food on the drush and then recoup that food almost straight away. And Chris's map being pretty good after he asked for it, after he hoped and prayed for it in the game room, may have inclined him to go for more of a drush oriented play instead of the scouts that you so often see from Mongols. We've also seen a few Mongol players doing, especially I think mentalists doing like men-at-arms forwards, but that's kind of uncommon. Drush now moving in for Chris onto Winchester's wood line, getting nice downhill hits against this trapped villager, and that's going to be a second villager down in this game for Winchester. So Chris doing really great with his starting units, well, initial units here, the scout plus the drush moving in independently and both picking up a villager each. So both players on the way to Feudal Age. Winchester going up with 23 population, 22 villagers, so that would have been a 25 population up otherwise. Did go to the gold, attempted to go to the gold with 2 villagers before, so he may have been wanting to do some kind of man-at-arms play before. He may even actually lose a second villager on this hill. The drush moving in on the wood line and having this unfortunate little hill here has been really pivotal thus far, and it's forcing Winchester away from his wood line with more and more villagers every time the militia move in and manage to do the massive damage. Winchester's starting to get out some militia of his own here now, but with the disruption to his economy thus far, he won't be executing his plans as fluidly as he'd hoped. And Chris now reaching the Feudal Age with 27 villagers and a pretty walled in base. He's actually walled himself in completely, so probably going to be able to do more of a drush fast castle sort of play here, potentially. And the opening up with archery range blacksmith instead of double archery range to begin with, maybe signalling that it's actually a little bit short on gold to think about doing that straight away, so it might not be quite such a drush fast castle as we would otherwise be seeing, but certainly with the food in the bank, with the aid of those deer that he's been taking out in the front of his base for such a long time. Winchester meanwhile used those militia that he made to advance across the map, upgraded to man-at-arms and sent 2 villagers forward, building 2 archery ranges in this position. I'm not sure how much good scouting information he had up until that point of just how walled Chris actually was, and indeed we can see here that he didn't actually have very good scouting information of the full circumference of Chris's base at all. So right now he doesn't really know that this is walled in, and he doesn't know that Chris's base is actually this good, that he's got all these resources in the back that he can retreat to. So doing 1 tower here that's going to take away a wood line, but it's not really going to be absolutely decisive here. It's not like if a tower was to come up on this wood line for Winchester. Drush for Chris kind of going idle on the gold of Winchester, not picking up any villager kills there, but did actually kind of idle a couple of villagers that Winchester forgot about. That militia will now go down. And Winchester deleted his tower, tried to rebuild it somewhere else, but Chris's placement has been pretty good, kind of stopping Winchester from building a tower in many of the locations. But Winchester has now found a spot where he can build it out of range of the tower and still hit the villagers working on the wood line. Being forced away from there though by the few skirmishers that Chris has behind his walls. Let's take a look at Chris's resource count, see if he's still hanging around in the Feudal Age for now, although starting to stockpile the gold and the food that he needs, having to of course spend some of those resources to drive Winchester away from his walls. He wouldn't want to be clicking up too fast until he knows for sure that he's safe, because with Winchester coming forward strongly with 2 ranges, which I will see if Chris doesn't actually know about those. he wouldn't want to be clicking up too fast, since he could certainly get into trouble if he just tried a straight FC and Winchester broke through the walls. So Winchester does now get that tower up with the aid of the reinforcements, and it's going to break through the house quick wall, and this is going to be very, very dicey for Chris now. I was saying that he wouldn't have wanted to go up too fast until he knew he was safe, and now we see a problem because man-at-arms are into the base of Chris, backed up by a few skirmishers and archers, and Chris right now doesn't really have enough archers to take those man-at-arms down really, really quickly, so they can wreak havoc upon Chris's army for now, especially those skirmishers which they fare so well against. Winchester can continue to bring archers in, and actually he's bringing 2 more villagers through the whole. Well, he wanted to bring 2 more villagers through the hole in the wall, but I'm trying to see if Chris has actually sealed that up for now. Kind of hard to tell with the flag in the way. I could almost do with the small walls mod. But for now, Chris is adding a 3rd archery range. We can see that he spent so many more resources in the last few minutes because he knows he needs to hang around in Feudal to try and deal with this first and foremost. Producing skirmishers from both ranges to help defend. Getting up the 3rd archery range now, and Winchester has been able to do a 2nd tower, so he must have been on stone back at home. I did want to check that, but equally didn't want to take my eyes off the action that was unfolding at the back of Chris's base. But with the Chris being willing to attack with all of these villagers, and Winchester's army numbers now starting to diminish somewhat whilst Chris's army grows, Winchester's forced to kind of beat a little bit of a retreat now, not really having the same presence in the back of Chris's base anymore. And Chris is going to wall that up with a market, which is always a great building to be trying kind of re-walling with, because it's just so big that you can re-wall from kind of further away. And Winchester's going to do a 2nd tower here. He's actually probably thinking about with that he's going to be able to hit the stone mine going forward, and kind of keep Chris off stone for a while. Meanwhile at home, Winchester's still very heavily on stone with 5 villagers and 150 stone in the bank, so he's going to be able to do a couple more towers if he manages to find another decent spot. Doing some harassment on the wood line as well, but Chris has mostly relocated his lumber economy towards the back of the base here. Not the most terribly efficient wood line that you'll ever see, but doing the job for now. Meanwhile, Winchester's still continuing to produce heavily from both of these forward ranges, transitioning more into archers now. We saw that he did have a lot of villagers on gold. He's going to defend at home actually with a tower. He probably feels like Chris, with having gone up later and having not really, well, Winchester having not really interrupted Chris's economy too much, probably feels Chris may get to the feudal age ahead of him. We see both armies clashing on the front now, and Winchester trying to micro against this but taking a lot of casualties himself. I think that's a roughly even fight up to now for both players, but Winchester hanging around just a moment too long, I think, with the number of skirmishers that Winchester had and that Chris had, and with Winchester's army mostly being archers at that point. Now he's going to kind of retreat and try and stay away from those skirmishers, avoid losing any more archers before he's able to reach the castle age a little bit later on and upgrade those into crossbows. Just defending at home with towers against just a few skirmishers will be satisfactory for now. Meanwhile, Winchester is just building a housing estate out the back of Chris's base. He may as well use those villagers to do something whilst they're over there, since he doesn't seem to have a good spot to build a tower just for now. Chris is going to move in on Winchester's stone and gold mines simultaneously, attacking villagers down here. And this looks like the more likely location for him to perhaps pick up a kill, because right now he's being forced away from the mines up here, and Chris is actually losing pretty much all of that army for just one villager of Winchester's. Over here, one of Chris's units going down. Actually, we could see a wolf getting in on the action here. Winchester's got to gang up on it, so no wolf kills, but looks like Winchester was so lucky not to lose a villager or two here. Look at how low HP all of those are. He's actually still there building a tower with a 2 HP villager. If Chris checks that, with his units he's going to be able to take that down, but looks like he's just going to back away from the tower. And meanwhile Winchester actually kicking up first, which seemed unlikely, but I guess it's a product of Chris having laying down that third archery range and then producing so many more skirmishers, whereas Winchester had transitioned more into archers from just 2 archery ranges. But actually the castle age time between the two players is not going to be dramatically different, just around 30 seconds. And we'll see both players arriving at the castle age at more or less the same time. For now, Chris with slightly more military, but that is basically all skirmishers. Looking at what Winchester's doing right now, he's getting scale barding armor, so quite likely to be going for that knight's transition at the start of Castle Age in order to try and clean up Chris's skirmishers. This is the stable coming up. I was wondering if he built one already, but just for now, keeping an eye on this ball of units that Chris has, actually taking a ton of fire from the TC, but not many villagers in sight, so the units aren't going down. See right now that Chris still had units hovering around this area, but not really achieving too much. Getting a tiny little bit more harassment on the gold and the farms, but meanwhile Chris actually doing bloodlines as well. Winchester with just actually laying down a second stable here, and Chris with 3 stables, which is just ambitious, and I'm really excited to see how this pans out. We saw him getting bloodlines, and I want to see what he starts to produce from those stables when he hits the castle age. I'm presuming it's going to be knights to go aggressive with. Let's just slow the game down, as it is running a bit too fast after that pause we had. It tends to kind of make the game start running fast from then on. Those knights, once they take down a couple of the archers in particular, they should then be able to clean up the rest of the skirmishers. Probably one knight at least going to go down for Winchester, but that army won't live too much longer. Meanwhile, Winchester did get the crossbow upgrade and he's in through this wall over here, but a much sturdier second line of actual building walls for Chris and a couple of towers will mean that Winchester has no joy in achieving anything by breaking through the west wall of Chris's base. That knight is now going to clean up the rest of Chris's skirmisher army, and really Chris just forgetting about that army now. He knows he can't really achieve much of it now that bloodlines +1 knights are on the field for Winchester. So let's have a look at what Chris is doing. Pouring knights from those stables. So far only on 4 knights and not producing from any of his stables, so the 3 stable play was a little bit optimistic, but in the meantime Winchester actually found something to do with those crossbows, positioning them behind the wood lines, and I think getting 2 kills, 1 there and 1 there in total. Really great, because it forces Chris away from that wood line whilst this other one remains towered, so things looking very messy for Chris at the moment in terms of wood gathering economy. Chris's knights with +1 are going to catch these crossbows out in the open now and downhill, so they won't be existing for too much longer. Wonder if Winchester may well pick up 1 or 2 knights if he micros. Well, he's actually picking up 2. The crossbows now starting to get some downhill hits on the knights as they micro back up the hill, so good actual return for Winchester here. I was expecting Chris to only lose 1 or 2 knights, but really, I think 3 in total going down there. Really good result for those crossbows that got caught out in the open. Winchester still on 1 TC for now, but getting up a second one on this gold in a really great spot, considering it will be able to fire at villages, well, garrison villages from both golds, and then fire at units that are moving around it. Also a monastery coming up for Winchester, because he knows Chris is heavy on knights. I'd like to see if he knows just how many stables Chris is on. Only sees the 1 for now. Would probably be very surprised if he knew that Chris was on the 3 stables. Especially considering that Chris hasn't really produced enough knights to justify having made that 3rd stable, in my view, at this point. Good 3rd TC here for Winchester. This is the only wood line that's kind of close to his base at the moment that he has good access to, so securing that is really important. And don't forget that the whole of this time Winchester has been heavily on stone down here, so he's able to produce a castle here. Kind of reminiscent of that game against Fire, where he use the castle to secure a big hill in the front of his base as the Goths and really turn a game around against Mongols, but he's still very much in this game compared to being very behind in that game. Chris, though, with a really threatening army at this point, a mixture of a lot of knights and crossbows, whereas Winchester kind of cut production, and right now is only on 5 total military, going for the more economic oriented approach, being on 3 TCs now and trying to defend with a monastery, but only has 1 monk, also defending with the castle of course, which will go up, but this part isn't walled up and Chris will be able to come in. Obviously there are a couple of towers that he will run into, so he'll probably need siege to kind of push in there, especially with a number of spearmen being there, but Chris is already on top of that. He's got a forward siege workshop, a couple of outposts giving him vision over what Winchester is doing, and he's beginning to produce a battering ram. Well, beginning to push forward with a battering ram that he has produced even. And circling around with an additional group of units towards the top here, so we'll keep an eye on what those are able to do. Don't think there's a gap here, so Chris is probably going to try and maybe take down this house, which will allow him to move around the back of Winchester's economy. Would be really nice for him if he was able to get crossbows on this hill and maybe pick off a couple of villages there. Wants to be careful though, because he doesn't want to move in underneath both of these towers, because we'll lose a number of crossbows that way, and Huskar's now coming out for Winchester that will be super effective against the crossbows of Chris with their high piercing armour, if not for the fact that Chris of course has a ton of knights in the area, meaning that the Huskars can't really take the engagement up to now, and this is looking kind of dicey for Winchester. Although he's secured other areas of the map with the castle and extra TCs, 3 battering rams and the mixed knights and crossbow army is looking really powerful for Chris. Great combined arms force that counters both the Huskars and the pikemen, and potentially even allows him to snipe monks. Combined arms usually, of course, in Age of Empires being the best approach to stop anything that you do being easily countered. And those rams are going to continue pushing on down, having taken down 2 towers. Now I'm going to take out a barracks for, well, the barracks of Winchester. Monks for Winchester were trying to get in some conversions. Looks like they got a knight over here as well. But in the meantime, Chris is going to just continue pushing in. Still has 2 rams and will probably manage to take down one of Winchester's stables, which will leave Winchester kind of low on production facilities to actually fight off this attack of Chris. With 1 barracks going down, he's had to rebuild another one over here. I didn't see if he got the upgrade to allow Huskars to be produced from the barracks, but I assume not, since he's still full producing Huskars from the castle for now. But Chris is looking in a really great position. Let's have a look how many TCs he's on, because we haven't been looking at that up to now. Still the 1, so he's full aggression, and yet remains only 9 villagers behind at this point, despite the damage that he's been able to inflict and the resources that he's concentrating on that. Looks like Winchester's now going to go for that engagement, but he's moving uphill with the Huskars, and I feel that might not have been the best engagement if it were not for the fact that Winchester is bringing a number of monks behind and forcing those knights to retreat, and Winchester will now be able to deal with some of those battering rams, I should think. But still, doesn't want to overextend with just a small part of his army and risk losing it whilst the rest of his army is over here. This kind of fight really comes down to micro. If the crossbows can take out the pikemen, then the knights are free to clean up the Huskars, and it looks like Chris has done a great job of that then. Still on the 1 TC and continuing to pour knights from those stables. Now he's actually doing a much better job of making use of all 3. We can see producing from all of them now, so he's going to have a really threatening army that continues to grow. On 35 military now to Winchester's 13, and Winchester's really struggling to get the numbers. He has now put down another barracks, but he had lost the production facilities, and it was just up until he's kind of regained and more production facilities, he would have been struggling to keep pace with the production from Chris, who continues to flood knights, continues to flood crossbows, and is now producing more and more battering rams, even a 2nd forward siege workshop, and making great use of this hill to try and just push from, to be honest. We now see a ballistic coming in for Chris, which will enable him to micro and pick off monks and pikemen with his crossbow army much better. Doesn't want to let those crossbows get caught out by Huskars. Needs to make sure that they retreat to their bodyguards, the knights, but doing a great job of picking off several units as those infantry retreat from the crossbows. Another big engagement coming in. Once again, Winchester forced to take the fight uphill, but those pikemen still obviously doing massive damage to the crossbows, and pikemen doing massive damage to the knights, and Huskars doing massive damage to the crossbows. So it really depends on what units are engaging what at this point. But even so, the hill advantage in combination with the numbers for Chris meaning that he's taking that fight pretty decisively again and maintains a massive military presence on the edge of Winchester's base. Winchester now doing anarchy, so he's going to start being able to produce a lot more Huskars in the mix from the barracks that he's laying down extras as well. Nothing much going on at at Chris's base. Chris starting to actually push out, take a little bit more map control and around the edges of his base and lay down more economy, whilst he continues to push in with these battering rams. The odds are good that he's actually going to be able to get this TC, especially as he continues to bring in more battering rams, but one going down for now, and Winchester may think about a quick run in with some Huskars to take down a battering ram just to keep his TC alive. But the knights are there and going to be able to take care of those Huskars once again. The army for Chris has just been so powerful, the combined arms of the knights and the crossbows, and Winchester has been struggling to get the right units to target the right units of Chris up until now. And that TC is down, so Winchester is down to 2 town centres at this point, losing access to a lot of farmland and having lost access to a wood line and both of his remaining stone mines at this point. We can see that Winchester is floating a ton of resources, lots of wood and gold in the bank because he's just been losing the farmland. Goths need a lot of food, especially when trying to produce infantry from multiple production structures like this, and the loss of the town centre and the farmland has been meaning that Winchester's had a real struggle to just continue flooding units. But for now though, having gotten anarchy from the barracks, from the castle to allow him to produce Huskars from the barracks, his army is starting to look a lot stronger and he's beginning to push Chris back. Chris also adding in light cavalry, so maybe trying to save on gold a little bit more at this point, or he may have just been floating some extra food. But for now, Winchester is starting to turn the tide, and he does actually have 15 villager leads, so he's getting to that stage of the game when the Goths flooding units from all the production structures start to look very powerful indeed. He's kind of weathered the storm, and he's actually reclaiming his farmland now with a mill, which will enable him to start working. And right now Chris is being forced all the way back, and we're seeing the kind of vulnerability of the Mongols from the moment when the Goths get to the late Castle Age and are able to produce lots of Huskars and pikemen from many different buildings. I was saying before that the Goths do have their moments in this kind of dynamic between them and the Mongols, and really now Chris is going to be at a disadvantage unless he manages to survive until the very late game and get this supremely powerful Imperial Age Mongols army. But right now it's Winchester's time in the sun, so to speak, and he'll be able to kind of take revenge for all of the raiding and destruction that Chris has been inflicting upon him up until now. And Chris, I think, remains on just the one town centre for now, and recognising that he's very far behind in macro terms, he's called GG because he simply cannot deal with the Huskars pushing him all the way back. It looked very threatening for Winchester for a while, but managing to hold out this last line of defence. I think a really crucial moment was him getting anarchy from the castle, enabling him to ramp up his Huskar production no end, and turning the game from there, just about holding the line of defence and recovering his food economy. Let's take a quick look at the achievements before backing out for game 3. Hello, user who joined my channel. I'm guessing that's Taff.
Indeed, sir.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Okay, I'll let you crack on finishing your game, and then when you're ready, we can.
Yeah,
I'll join you.
I'm just showing the achievements on screen, so feel free to join from any time. Help me save my voice. I can already feel my throat getting raw. There's so much action in these games. So you can see that kills and deaths more or less even for Chris, but that was always going to be a bit of a losing proposition for him, whilst making more expensive units like knights against the cheaper Goth infantry, whilst Winchester was also on a larger economy backing that up. And really the moment when Chris's rams and knights started to be depleted and Winchester started to push him back was the turning point.